I spoke to him about this in the article, and it's still out there. And it's an interesting story. He went to the US thinking that it would help his talent development. So he played for a high school in Florida, and then tried out for a bunch of MLS teams. Charlotte was one of them, and then none of them, Charlotte, Colorado, and a third. It's in my article. And none of them wanted him. So his agent was like, well, maybe the US isn't a good idea after all. And he went back, and then he signed for Leganes in La Liga 2. No, actually in La Liga. And then they got relegated, right? And he played there for a few games, and Leipzig spotted him. I think he was part of that talent school that Marcel Schäfer knew about in the US, because Marcel Schäfer, the sporting director, spent some time there, right? In Florida, and had an eye on him. And it's one of those stories where they signed him for 20 million euros plus bonuses, and you could immediately see from the first match day, I think, that he's extremely talented. He was already called up to, when I interviewed him, part of the article was that we were able to break that he was nominated for the Ivory Coast National Team, right? It's a good national team. It's not easy to get in. He's 19 now, I think. He's just turned 19. So at a very young age. I love this player. I think the first time, for when I did the research for the article, and I looked a little bit into him and then watched him play and then spoke to him as well. And it's a joy to talk to. His English obviously is very good from his time in the United States. And he's a very articulated young man who has strong opinions about things and speaks really well for himself, and shows an enormous amount of intelligence about how he goes about in his career. And his career path has been extremely unique, right? Going to a place where he realized that wasn't for him, and then making this decision to go to Spain of all places, right? That's not necessarily normal either. I think it shows that he's already seen quite a bit of the world. And on the field, I mean, he's so good, Stefan. I mean, he's dynamic, he's fast, he's great in one-on-one situations. He can put pressure on opponents' back line, constantly on the move. I think, for me personally, when people saw that Leipzig was going to pay 20 million euros for this guy that no one has ever heard of, there was a lot of raised eyebrows, but I would say the scouting department hit the jackpot here.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, this Leipzig team is just kind of full of outstanding players. But no, he was absolutely great in this game. As were just about everyone in that Leipzig team. It felt to me, watching this game, particularly in the first half, like a team who are very good at attacking came up against a team who are very bad at defending. And that was apparent 4 minutes into the match, when Kornrad Harder just basically turned round, outran Robin Koch, and headed home a really straightforward ball over the top. And I could sit here for about 15 minutes and probably intricately break down every mistake that Arthur Thiat and Robin Koch made in this game, but I won't, because I've already done that like 3 or 4 times this season. And I feel like I'm going mad because I can't watch Frankfurt without watching these two guys just make an absolute clown show of this team's defence. But regardless of that, I think they were directly responsible for at least 3 of the goals that they conceded against Leipzig. But focusing more on the positives, Diomande, outstanding. Nusa, great. I thought Baumgartner was outstanding again. I wrote a newsletter on him a few weeks ago, in fact, might have been last month, explaining his new role in this Leipzig team and how Werner's kind of managed to get him playing his best. And, that was apparent. But the player that stood out to me was Kornrad Harder, Manu. He's a player who's kind of had maybe a bit of a slow start at Leipzig. He was a player that they kind of picked up almost, I don't want to say on the fly in the summer, but it felt a bit like, like when you go shopping and you've done all your you're in the supermarket, you've picked up everything on the list, and then you get to like the cash till, and there's like a pack of crisps or chocolate or something. You're like, I'll just grab that. It felt a bit like Leipzig did that when they picked up Kornrad Harder this summer. And I always thought he was really impressive in Portugal whenever I watched Sporting in the Champions League. I always thought he was a really powerful number 9. And I think he showed in this game what he's capable of, because that first goal, he comes short for the ball, lays it off, and then turns Robin Koch and just takes off. And then I think it's Baumgartner who just plays a ball over the top to him, and he just powers down on goal, heads it in. And in the second goal, breaks on the counter-attack after Frankfurt hit the crossbar, unfortunately. He runs down the pitch with the ball. Arthur Thiat completely turns off as he's looking at players over his shoulder, and allowing Harder to kind of run into the goal, and then he lays the ball off to Baumgartner. And I think both those goals show what Harder's good at. He can be a penalty box player, he can score the goals, but he's also a guy that can run the lines. And throughout the match, Frankfurt defenders were just bouncing off him. The guy's obviously, he's stocky, he's built, he looks to me like an old-fashioned number 9 where, centre halves just struggled to kind of knock him over. And I thought he was the perfect kind of focal point for that Leipzig attack, and I thought they all played tremendously well, but I don't know, man. We're obviously looking at a Leipzig side here who continue to impress. We can talk about Frankfurt and their mistakes and how this result comes after only a draw against Wolfsburg and then that defeat in the Champions League, and seriously question where this team is actually going as we approach the January transfer window and whether they can actually turn things around. But Leipzig look on fire. And I know they still have their hiccups from time to time, but it looks like on the day they could probably beat anyone in the.
Well, now there were so many question marks about Ole Werner and whether he was the right choice for this club, and if he can work with young players. I think that is. If you had any doubts about that, just look at also who he brought on in this game, right? Samba Konate comes on, a 16-year-old striker from the academy for Yan Diomande in the 87th minute, but TDM Gomez comes on, right? Max Finkgräfe comes on. Maximovic comes on. He starts Nedeljkovic on the right from the beginning. Hey, the front line with Nusa Harder and Diomande, all young players. I think if there's ever been any doubt on whether Ole Werner can work with young players, I think that's completely out of the window now, right? I think we can now say with some confidence that whatever the issues were at Werder Bremen with him not playing young players, it had nothing to do with young players, but rather with him trying to survive in the job. And, I think he's proving that. The sad thing is the hiccups, right? They're on 29 points, already 8 points behind Bayern Munich. The game now, the first game that they lost to Bayern Munich looms large. The defeat to Hoffenheim looms large, right? Those are and we've seen this with all the teams following Bayern Munich. I don't know if it will make much of a difference because Bayern Munich are firing out of all the cylinders this year. But you just kind of wonder if these teams could have maybe kept the gap a little bit closer. Or maybe if they can still close the gap, we'll see. But, of the teams that are now behind Bayern Munich, I would say Leipzig are the one that is, if there is ever going to be a title challenge, which I don't think is going to happen this year, it will probably come from them.
Yeah, we were talking before the show about how there's that big kind of Pokal clash between Bayern and Leipzig. So I was going to say Leverkusen, but Leipzig's the right word, on the horizon in the new year. And, regardless of where Leipzig can actually catch Bayern in the Bundesliga and where they can actually beat Bayern in the Bundesliga, because they still have to play them in Leipzig, if I'm not mistaken, or was that first game in Leipzig?
No, that's first game on January 17 is in Leipzig.
Right, okay, sorry, I'm thinking of the Pokal game, sorry.
That's going to be back in Munich.
So they play at home. Yeah, they play Bayern at home in the Bundesliga, and as you said, the 17th of January. Then they play them in the Pokal quarterfinals a few weeks after that. And, it'll be interesting to see because we've been talking about this from the start of the season. We were all waiting to see if whether, Werner was going to be able to kind of hit the ground running, whether he can kind of take on the job and kind of get this team kind of all singing from the same hymn sheet because, Leipzig just hoovered up so many wonder kids. He's done that, aside from the odd hiccup. We just kind of have to wait and see whether A, they can keep that consistency, but also B, whether they can kind of knock some points off Bayern. And, you're right, Bayern do look unbeatable at the minute, but Bayern do have a relatively small squad. They are relatively reliant on key players, and I guess in the odd match like this one against Stuttgart the weekend there, they can bring in a Guerrero in midfield or stick Jackson up front, and obviously Bischoff's been doing a decent job at left back, but when they kind of get on that home straight, around February, March time, and they've got Champions League games, and they have to really kind of prioritise who plays when. Maybe injuries start to get pick up. That's when Leipzig can kind of take advantage of them. And it's interesting, they've kind of got 2 games relatively close to one another in that short period of time. So we'll see. We'll see what Leipzig can do. But, you know, they look like a great team. But I guess the only thing is whether that kind of team of young players can obviously then go and do it against a Bayern, because they haven't really had that experience. They're not playing in the Champions League. And as we saw at the start of the season, when they played Bayern, they did kind of look like rabbits stuck in the headlights.